Women Who Code Data Science community has a strong base with more than 5,000 members and has launched around 240 plus events since 2019. The information is spread out in the community website, Slack channel, and other social media sites like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Do join our micro content platform Beacons, delivering most recent updates about the community events. Follow our blogs and job section to benefit from our community. Volunteers are welcome to join our community. Get involved to make a difference by joining the network and also in specific digital tracks of your interest. Do visit us on our Slack channel and find more information on Volunteer Opportunities channel. We also have a dedicated section for companies on global partnership on hiring, and we also offer scholarships. Come and expand your technical proficiency and leadership skills. So here we are. I would like to introduce the speaker for today. The speaker for today is Archana Vaidheeswaran. She is a data product manager at Women Who Code and a passionate advocate for women in technology. She is recognized as a fellow by the Python Software Foundation for her commitment leveraging Python and AI in data science. She has delivered engaging talks at conferences like FOSS Asia, Women Who Code Connect, Scipy 2023, and has a broad perspective on the role of AI and data across various sectors. She has experience leading a thriving community of Python enthusiasts as a Women Who Code Leadership Fellow and is here to help you navigate and understand the complex world of large language models. To give the forthcoming session with Archana, there is going to be an Ask Me Anything session on Slack, which will be scheduled and forwarded to you shortly. This is for today, and over to you, Archana.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kirthikka. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in and for taking out the time today. I hope you can see my screen. Shall I go ahead and get started?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. This is our last series of the last session of the series. And I'm really excited to share, this last session. I think this last session is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be something that is much more closer to what happens in the real world. So I'll go ahead and get started. So as usual, I usually go through like the goals of the presentation. So I think the goals of this presentation is firstly be able to understand what kind of products like GPT can build. And so GPT obviously is a great tool right now. And now that you've learned a lot about how it works, your next, I guess, goal in mind would also be like, can I actually implement it? Can I end up like using a product? Can I end up building something that's viable? So that's what we'll talk about, what kind of products you can build with GPT, know about different stages of product development, and through a use case. So we have a very interesting use case for Chrome, building a Chrome extension, and we'll walk you through how we did it and be able to do like another simple use case, like, so I want to introduce Soham out here. So Soham will be like co-leading the session with me.
Hi, hello.
Yeah, so both of us are, so he's going to be also talking about the use case, and he also has a broad understanding of how to use LLMs. So he's also going to like, Soham, feel free to chime in anywhere and, give your suggestions and ask as many questions as possible, because I feel like this is our last session, and also it's great to know more about LLMs and know more about how to build products around it. And the best way to do that is to like, we have covered a lot of content, but there's a chance we might miss something out. So, don't worry if your questions sound naive or something. We are here to help. And again, like everyone has a different learning journey altogether. So don't worry about it. So and finally, we'll tell you about ways that you can contribute to different LLM products. We are also building one. So if you're interested, feel free to contribute. And let me go ahead So yeah, product development in LLMs. So as I said, we've covered a lot of sessions in the series. Don't worry if you haven't attended, you don't need a lot of context for this session, but feel free to check out the videos on YouTube. So, the first session we had was on introduction to LLMs. We talked about how ChatGPT came to be and understand like terminologies around like LLMs. For example, tokenization or transformers that are used in articles and blogs, understand the basic pipeline behind a GPT. Like, we go through like fine tuning, and then you go through supervised fine tuning, and then you go through RLHF, which reward modeling, and then finally RLHF. So you have the basic pipeline of a GPT. So we went through that as well. And then there is fine tuning of LLMs. So we understood what it means to fine tune LLMs, and when do we decide to fine tune LLMs, right? Like when we want the LLM to do something very specific, we have to end up fine tuning it and know the architectural choices when it comes to fine tuning. And then we went through prompt engineering. So we introduced what is prompt engineering, how do you like end up creating those prompts to help your LLM, like, give better, like talk in a better manner and closer to what humans want. So you need to feed it prompts and need to feed it how we will talk so that it helps talk in the similar way. And finally, we also have like RLHF and reward modeling, which we covered in the last session, which is where we understood what is reward modeling, and we understood what is reinforcement learning, human feedback, and how to do that. How would you create like a comparison data in the case of reward modeling, and also talk about how hallucinations happen. So as usual, we do like a recap of our last presentation. We do some fun quizzes. And so let's start with a few fun quizzes, and feel free to use the chat. Again, don't feel like, I might say the wrong answer. It's okay. To be honest, like it's not like we put out the chat anywhere. It's mostly for you to learn. So just, focus on your learning journey and what you can take away from this. So yeah, so the first question is, sorry, one second. Okay. Consider the example of training a dog using reinforcement learning techniques. Now, assume you want to train a language model. Let's name it Lingo in the same way. What could be the treat for Lingo be when it generates a good response? First, is it a digital cookie or is it a real cookie? Is it a good numerical reward or is it a pat on the back? So yeah, feel free to use the chat. Okay. Awesome. So people are already guessing it. So yeah, it is a numerical reward. So why is it so? Is because in the case of LLMs, which are language models and which live inside, a system, unlike a real dog, you need to give it some form of numerical reward to differentiate. So if you remember, we talked about reward learning. So reward modeling. So reward modeling was like you create a function that assigns a numerical score to possible outputs generated by the model in response to a specific prompt. So if you remember, we went through this very interesting example, like what is the capital of France? So, so if a example is given to a prompt, what is the capital of France? The potential response can be, for example, the LLM says that, okay, the capital of France is Paris, and it also says the capital of France is Berlin. So now the winning response is Paris. So there's a human labeler that would rank the first response as being more appropriate since it's correct, and the comparison data then informs the reward model about which response should get a higher reward or preference. So this is what we talked about in the last session as well. And the winning response is sort of the correct response. And yeah, so I mean, it's quite like context dependent. So it means like, at some context, you would want the model to react a certain way. And like, some places you might want it to be humorous in the way that it reacts, or maybe in some places you want it to be serious and professional. And since like language models don't understand those emotions, we need people to reward, or in the sense like, give more value, numerical value to responses which we think are right versus the ones that we think are wrong. So actually, like, even though like the perception is that LLMs are, built just by using machines. There were actually a lot of humans involved in the way that it has become right now. And okay, let's go on to the next quiz. Okay, remember the game of telephone, where, one person talks to the next, and, in the end, the message changes. So now imagine an LLM playing this game, like a large language model playing this game, but it starts adding its own twist to the messages. What would we call this behavior in the world of LLMs? Is it storytelling? Is it telephoning? Is it hallucinating? Or is it mimicry? Awesome. So I'm really glad most of you remember this session. So yeah, so if you remember, like the game of telephone, you whisper a message to the person next to you, they pass it on. By the time the message gets to the last person, it's usually altered, often humorously. So this change happens because each person sort of interprets and conveys the message a bit differently. So in the world of LLMs, we say model is hallucinating when it starts to generate information that wasn't present in the original output. And much like the players of the telephone game, it can be like very problematic because, you end up making up information that's probably misleading or inappropriate. So I think this is a situation you would have encountered with maybe even ChatGPT, where it like ends up giving you the wrong answer, but it's so confident with it, it might end up like convincing you as well, or even try to tell you, no, what I'm saying is actually right. And that's because the LLM inside, since it's a very large language model, it has like different paths. You can like think of it like different alleys to come to like a conclusion when you give it a question, or give an answer when it gives a question. And it can oftentimes, since it's a large model, there's a good chance it also can take the wrong alley or the wrong part to come to the wrong answer. So that's when the model starts hallucinating. And yeah, that's like one of the problems with large language models. And okay, so you have another question here. So suppose you have a language model that is learning to write poems. The model does well, but struggles with certain types of prompts like writing a haiku. Which step would you likely take to help improve the model? Firstly, feed it more sonnets, ask it to write a limerick, create comparison data with correct and incorrect haikus, teach it the history of haikus. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering. So yeah, it is create a comparison data with correct and incorrect haikus. So if you remember this chart that we sort of created, I know it looks super complicated if you haven't come across it before, but what we basically talk about is, do you really need to move towards reward modeling and RLHF, because those require a lot of humans and you also require like a lot of resources, so which means like it requires like more budget around it. So this chart basically helps you determine if you really need to progress to that stage. So so in this case, if you were on step 3, which is right here, simply providing it explicit labels for the haiku maybe does not help you. So while you're doing supervised fine tuning, you give it some labels saying, oh, these are the ones that sound like haiku, and it does not help you. In this case, then you need to progress towards creating a comparison data where each example consists of a prompt, that is, write a haiku about spring. Maybe like that's an example, and it gives you a better response and a worse response. And slowly, as you feed this to the model sort of learns it. And that's what is reward modeling. Okay, so now we are coming to the fun section for today, which is LLM product development. And we threw in this fun graphic we drew last time. And yeah, we will walk you through it. Like, what does it mean what are the different stages of building products with LLM? And I guess I should preface this by saying that it's something that we built a product and then we realized these are the stages. So I think like when you go out there and learn, you might like learn something a bit different, and that's perfectly fine because, this field is so new that, there are a lot of people now that be sort of putting out like content, and that's everyone's learning, right? Everyone's learning is going to be different, and that's how they probably put it out. So yeah, I mean, this is how we came across it. But if you do come across something else and want to add on, just feel free to let us know. We would love to, collaborate with you, and maybe because we write newsletters every week. So if you want to write something on it, feel free to let us know, and I'll give you the link in the end. And so, yeah, so what kind of products will GPT be good at? I know we have a question. Okay, so someone asked, when you say it gives you the answer confidently, what do you mean? How do you measure confident in the model's response when using ChatGPT for example? Okay, let me answer this, and so feel free to chime in like later if you feel I haven't answered it completely. But so what I mean by giving it confidently is like the literal sense of confidence. So like for example, with at least the newer model of GPTs, if you tell it, you gave me the wrong answer, it ends up like saying, oh, apologies. But usually what happens is when you ask it a question and it's giving you a very long answer about it, it'll actually make up scenarios or make up the answer. Even if it's wrong, it'll put so much of text around it that it'll actually sound like it's right, but it ends up being wrong. Now this is like because like LLMs don't have that sort of understanding of what each word means, and what they do instead is just put weights around each word. They can't really like differentiate, and that's why like when it comes to a certain conclusion, it might give you like a large text around it, and you really need to read what the response is, because it actually might be wrong. So even if like it would give you like a lot of information around it, that information is also wrong. So that's what I mean by the confidence. Like, it's able to give you a lot of information that's incorrect. Yeah. Anything else I missed? So you're muted.
Forward.
Sorry, no, I think that's good. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let me move on. So what kind of products that's a great question, by the way. Feel free to ask more questions. Feel free to keep them coming. And yeah, so let me move on. What kind of products will GPT be good at? So we believe like GPT will excel at text generation and creative applications, which are primarily its strengths. So these systems excel when given a brief context and some data to work with, creating more expansive, tailored output content. This makes GPT ideal for creators such as writers, artists, and to develop these applications, you will need like well-crafted prompts, a user-friendly interface, and an API call to the OpenAI. And while GPT models are powerful, they do have limitation. They're not proficient at tasks that require classification or information extraction, common AI workloads, and startups attempting to use GPT for data querying or question answering from an extensive document may encounter challenges. So this is when this is something when we consider GPT on its own without like fine tuning or without giving it prompt engineering. So GPT on its own without doing anything like the trained model that like OpenAI gives us will encounter issues, we believe, such as long and expensive prompts and inconsistent outputs. So another concern is verifying the accuracy of the data around GPT. So this is what I talked about. So since it gives a lot of data out, human verification can be challenging and time consuming, because it's been trained on a lot of data, so it might once in a while give us a wrong answer. And since it ends up giving it confidently, we really need people to read through it and see if it gave us the wrong answer. And in case it gave us the wrong answer about some field we are working on, like for example, you're building something for the medical domain, right? And if someone is asking something very specific about some specific domain inside the medical field, and it ends up giving you the wrong answer, so that can be actually dangerous, right? So that is where you would need people to read through what it said. And let us say it talked about something very specific in a wrong manner, like I don't know, maybe it talks about some kind of bacterial infection in the wrong manner. So oh, if it's giving me wrong outputs about bacterial information in infection, or I need to give it more data to sort of understand that better and sort of fine tune the model to be specialized in the domain of medical fields. So that's when you need to take a step forward with models like this and understand that they might not be perfect all the time. And if you really need to deploy it for your specific use case, you have to go a step further. You have to fine tune, you have to do prompt engineering as such to really make it viable for the end goal. And so the ideal applications of GPT are best suited where, incorrect in outputs have minimal impact or can be easily checked for errors. And so, for example, GPT can efficiently generate small, easy, verifiable text snippets. So it includes stuff like SEO, content, writing sales messages, designing chatbots, and verification responsibility is sort of left out to the clients, right? So even if they encounter the wrong replies, like your customers or your clients, they should still be fine with it and they move on. But if it's like something really specific and really some field where like sort of the medical field where you can't, there's a very tiny room for errors, then you need to really, really verify what the GPT knows. And I think that's also an issue right now because we don't realize, like, we don't understand what did OpenAI train the new GPT on, which means we have to sort of rely on our own, we have to sort of see how it replies to answers and then come to a conclusion, okay, it's doing this really bad, so we need to start training it on those aspects. And I think if that is the case, then we need to take a step back before we sort of deploy it to specific use cases and start with fine tuning itself. I hope I didn't confuse you.
Yeah,
but
maybe I'll just chime in one thing here.
Yeah.
I think, like Archana said, we don't know what OpenAI trained GPT on. And why that's important for us to know that is, like, let's say you're building an application for like medical, like a medical chatbot application, right? You don't want your medical chatbot application to be trained on misinformation data, right? And so that's why it's also very important that you have a flow where you can check the answer that's generated by GPT, or or a flow where the user itself is smart enough to read the answer and know that it's wrong, and maybe regenerate it or something. Yeah.
So let me stop here to have much more clarity on the stage 3 that you were mentioning about, Archana. Like during the prompt engineering, we were asking a question like, what is the capital of France? So it is going to be a single, the prompt engineering obviously need to be trained in a better way so that the answer is right. Apart from that, if we need an expanded version of not being hallucinated, but as a storytelling, how does LLM supports it, and does it really supports it?
Yeah, so I think for something like that, LLMs do support it. But that's a scenario where you need to most probably train your own LLM or like fine tune an existing LLM. Because the more complex the application gets and the more if the cost of an error of the LLM is really high, like for instance, medical applications or maybe like financial applications, or I see a lot of LLMs being applied in law and stuff. So the cost of a wrong answer or a misinformation answer there is really high, and those are applications where you would ideally train your own LLM, or the other option is have a human verify the answer and make sure it's right.
So industry experts are really needed in this case. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also why you see most applications using LLMs now being like these SEO content generation or like PPT generation, or applications where the cost of an incorrect answer isn't really that high, and an application where the end user will definitely like check the generated output and fix it. And you don't see a lot of applications. I don't think I've seen any application where where the LLM is running fully automated, and you know, the cost of an incorrect answer is really high. Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
We have a
Thank
couple of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll answer them.
Yeah.
Are we as developers able to fine-tune ChatGPT? Yes, you can actually fine-tune it. The OpenAI has an API for that. So yeah, so you can fine-tune it. You can send data for fine-tuning. OpenAI will take care of the fine-tuning themselves. So it's not like you have to provision hardware to fine-tune it. OpenAI will do it. And then OpenAI will save the fine-tune model for you and you can query it. So it's actually quite easy to fine-tune a model like a GPT model using OpenAI. I think in fact, we showed this in one of our previous sessions. Given the downsides you just talked about ChatGPT, are there any specific scenarios where we can fully, I think that's trust the answers? That's a good question. I don't think there are much scenarios where I would really trust the answers, like everything that GPT generates. I think there are scenarios where the cost of a wrong answer is not that high, and in those cases, I would be okay with a wrong answer. Like, you know, like chatbot applications, applications like, let's say, character AI, or you know, like SEO content generation, writing emails, stuff like that. But yeah, if it's a very if it's an application where there's a lot of risk, or or you know, a wrong answer can lead to a lot of, you know, bad situations arising, then yeah, I wouldn't trust the answers of ChatGPT. I would use it more as like a guideline to create you know, solutions or answers, but yeah, I wouldn't run it autonomously.
Yeah, exactly. I think like it's more like, you know, I would say at the end of the day, you know, when we before large language models, even when we would like get clients who wanted to work on something specific, we would like say like, okay, give us the data and we'll train a model from scratch. And why we did that before, like before this, was we realized there's like a less margin of error if we started out with what data they gave us, right? Because like if they gave us specific data, it'll like work around that itself. So I think like similar to that, when we start moving towards large language models, you have to realize it's like, you know, you get a lot. Yeah, the model knows a lot at this point, but it's like at the same time, you actually, there's a lot of pros, but there's quite a bit of cons as well, because now the model knows a lot. There's also larger room for error. And that's exactly what's happening, is that now you have this like very large model, right? I mean, I think like, even if we think about how large it is, like I usually like, I still think I underestimate how large these models are. They're extremely large. So which means that you have a large room for error as well. So yeah, at one side you have this large model which you think, okay, now it's like it's a single glove that fits all method, but it's not. You end up actually having a lot of room for error. So I think, yeah, you know, where you have like something good happening, you also have like sort of the cons sneaking in. So we have to sort of balance it out and see where exactly it can be applied to.
Yeah, and I think Archana will cover this later, but I just want to add, like, because of all the stuff Archana said, LLMs, because they're so general, and you know, they're really good at these, like really good generally at most tasks. It's really great to use LLMs as a proof of concept, or to, you know, build an MVP, just to show that, you know, okay, a product like this will work. But then, yeah, you quickly move on to building, you know, either training your own large language model or using like some custom architecture. Yeah, I feel like LLMs are really good are really good for building POCs.
Yeah, which I think is also great, because right now you sort of need that momentum for people to start out and start putting products out there. But I think I feel like reliable products will be less and less with these very large language models directly. And yeah, we would need to do you would still, that's where I think the perception of, oh, these large language models came in and they're going to start replacing, jobs is also completely wrong, because it's never going to be true. The more larger, and I bet maybe OpenAI is already training a larger model than this. So the moment they start training even larger models, they'll just be more generalized. They'll just know more about other topics as well. But they won't, you still need experts, as Kirthikka also pointed out, you need industry experts to come in and help out. So I think yeah, I mean, if you're as we move towards using these models, you would still need people to come in and help out in creating that. Let me move ahead. So, okay, so there's a few fun quizzes that I added here as well. Which of these tasks is GPT well suited for? Is it information extractions from lengthy documents? Is it generating creative tailored content? Is it classifying large sets of data, or answering highly specialized questions? And feel free to use the chat again. So yeah, so it's actually information extraction from lengthy documents, because it helps you, if it's a very lengthy document, you can get some information out of it. And then what is a key concern when developing an application that relies on GPT generated outputs? So is it the interface, the color scheme, the verification of generated data accuracy, or the choice of programming language? So yeah, it's the verification of generated data accuracy, because even though GPT is very general, as we said, it can end up giving us the wrong answers at places. So, okay, now let me move on to this, which is a fun thing we did. Okay, hopefully it works. Okay. So this is something we built, which is ChatGPT Chrome extension. We built it almost 3 to 4 months back. So this was when GPT just came out. And I'm going to talk about, why we decided to build it, and then what are the things that we faced. And that's why we came up with these different stages of LLM product development. So, wait. Okay. So yeah, so this is the let me go back, wait, yeah. So this is the demo. So as you can see, this is a Slack where people can write a message. So this is mostly for people who are native speakers. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and see the demo. I hope my screen is visible. Okay. So it helps to translate. And once the text is translated, you can also use it to formalize in case you're using it in a professional setting. Okay. So yeah, so this is why did we build it, is because we wanted to sort of increase the accessibility on the web. So we realized more than half the world's population at least speaks 2 languages, and many people tend to think and work in their native tongue. And of consumers, 75% prefer to buy languages in their native language, highlighting the importance of sort of language accessibility. And website visitors will leave if they can't read or understand the content, creating a significant barrier for non-native English speakers. So, long and complex English text can be difficult for many people, including those with reading and learning disabilities, elderly individuals, or individuals with limited English proficiency. So we actually worked on this and sort of presented on this during FOSS Asia, which was held in April this year. So yeah, so there's this is where we come to the main aspect of product development, is that we realized there's different paths, different stages, but this is like a much more fun part of it. So there's like discovery, figuring out, oh, LLMs can build anything or do anything, and the excitement of doing a new project. So assembling like the foundation LLM project by choosing the API and training the data, and then you struggle up with coming with the right prompts and end up using a lot of nonsensical response, and now you can't make sense of the data and ending up making things work, and then finally you are overwhelmed. So that's what happens quite often. At least I think things have improved a bit now in the last 2 months, maybe 2 to 3 months, but that's what basically happens when you try building something very specific with LLMs. And yeah, so this is what the architecture we use. So this is, as you can see, this is like a Chrome extension. It has a backend which records like events, and we send the prompts to a Python backend, which interacts with an OpenAI API and then sends it back to the Chrome extension. And just as a fun fact, the front end you're seeing, we wrote it entirely with GPT. So we actually didn't, we both of us are not front end people. We have very limited knowledge on front end. So we actually wrote the entire thing using GPT. And the backend was sort of designed by us. So what do they not tell you about building these projects? There's maybe like Soham can emphasize more on it, because I think he also wrote a very big blog on it.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first issue we faced was from APIs from OpenAI. OpenAI's API don't have any SLAs, so that means they don't really guarantee any performance numbers or any latency numbers. And what we saw was like, sometimes our application would run like really quickly, like, give a response in a few seconds, and sometimes it would take more than a minute. And in some applications that latency is fine, but in applications like the one that we like this Chrome extension, which is more like a creative application, you don't really want delays, especially especially like a minute or more, because it kind of breaks your creative flow, right? So that was an issue that we faced. Another issue that we faced was OpenAI actually randomly deprecating their endpoints. And what happened was we had created the extension with like one endpoint, and we were like really happy with it. It was working really great. And then I think a few days before we were going to demo it, OpenAI deprecated the endpoint, and we had to move to like another endpoint. And our product didn't work as well anymore. So yeah, so that was also like a big issue for us. So it's kind of hard to build something on top of someone else's API when you don't know the performance numbers, or you don't know when when they will deprecate an API. And then the deprecation also caused us issues with our prompt engineering, because we had engineered our prompts for like an older API. And now that the API had changed, our prompt stopped working as well. So we had to, start doing prompt engineering from scratch. So it's not as easy as just like calling like, a different API. You actually have to put in a lot of effort to make sure the quality of your product remains the same when you change the API. A lot of people also build like these chains of LLMs. So like, the output of the one output from the LLM will feed into another output, and then that just keeps going like maybe 4 or 5 times. And we just realized like doing stuff like that doesn't really work. The results get much worse the more chains you have. Like for instance, another product that we built recently, which I think Archana will show later. I was able to get it to work with just like 2 levels of change. So like one output feeding into another LLM, and that's it. Anything after that, the results became like really bad. You'll also see people using agents, which is like LLMs will may have access to like some API or some tool, and it will interface with that tool and do some tasks. For instance, maybe the LLM itself will call another API and do some task. Those don't really work. So don't use that. The results are like so inconsistent that you can't really take something like that to production. And finally, we talked a bit about the trust and security issue as well. You don't want like a product like, let's say, like that's financial, like giving you financial advice to be trained on data from Reddit, right? So yeah, so that's some of the trust and security issues we face, like challenges that we faced as well.
Yeah. I think like, yeah, you want to cover this too?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry.
So what we realized was that
Yeah. Just one moment. Yeah, please go ahead.
yeah. So what we also realized while building this product was API costs are really low when you first start out. So that's why it's like really great to use OpenAI to build like proof of concepts or to just, get over like that hurdle of starting something. But then the more complex your product gets, the more API calls you need to make and the larger your prompts become. API costs can really skyrocket. And for instance, you might just start with like a one-line prompt, right? And then you realize, hey, like the results are not that consistent. So then you do something like a few shot prompting where you where you give some context to the language model, you provide some examples of questions and answers, and now your one sentence or like a few line prompt has become like half a page, right, of like maybe 400, 500 word prompt, right? So that's increased. And then you realize like sometimes the LLM hallucinates. So now you have to do something like chain of thought prompting, where you ask the LLM to think step by step while creating the generating the output, and that increases the size of your output. So now what was once maybe like a few lines of input and output prompt, and like input prompt and then output is now like maybe 1000 words, which is quite a lot, right? Your API costs will increase a lot, and as you increase the complexity of product and as you start gaining more users, the prompt number of prompts increases, and the size of the prompt also increases, so your API cost basically starts to balloon, right? And it pretty soon becomes unsustainable for a business. So that's when you would ideally fine tune a model, and then deploy it on your own hardware. Right. So that'll help you, that'll help with stuff like the prompt costs, because now, since it's on your own hardware, you don't really have to pay for prompts. You just have to pay for the hosting fees. So that'll be pretty much constant, right, for constant load. Also, it'll reduce your hallucinations, and also you'll start getting better results. But then if you want any good latency, you'll have to deploy your LLM to like two GPUs at least, right? If you want any reasonable latency, and ideally like maybe 3, 4, 5 GPUs, right? So those costs like will also start to increase a lot. And I think what will happen at the end is you will still have to train a custom model. These custom models, most of them you don't really need to deploy them to a GPU. You can get away with like CPUs, and that reduces costs and all. So yeah, so I think this is what like how the stages of LLM like product development will be. I think like a really good thing about LLMs and OpenAI in general is is at that first stage, where you may not have any data, you may not have any idea about how to build something, but you can, because these models are general enough, they can do most tasks in a pretty good way. So it reduces that initial hurdle of getting started. And because of that, you don't have to really be like this incumbent company with a lot of data and with a lot of resources to build a product. You can be like a small startup and still build something really cool. For instance, the demo that Archana showed for the Chrome extension, right? If before LLMs, if we wanted to build something like that, it would have taken us years to build something like that, right? Because it's really difficult to build these tools that can translate, that can formalize text, that can understand text and then change it to some other format, stuff like that, right? I think very few companies have that kind of data, right? Maybe like Grammarly and a few others only. But with the help of LLMs, we were actually able to build this over a weekend basically, and put it out there for people to use. And then and it took Grammarly like a few weeks after we released ours before they came up with their Grammarly Go product, which is like basically what the Chrome extension is. So yeah, so just me and Archana together, we could build something that worked pretty well, faster than this incumbent company. And I think that says a lot about what OpenAI has done to democratize how people are building AI-based products. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, let me move on. I know like it's we're running short of time. Yeah. So to like go over it very quickly in terms of stages. So the first is prompt tuning. So where you put wrappers around these prompts, like providing users an easy way to use LLMs and to solve problems. And our application at this stage, like with the Chrome extension, was like many other people. And then you have like to stay like competitive, you have to start using like personal data and documents, like as Som said, like some form of information which involves using user data to your model and make it a much more personalized experience. So this integration will require setting up databases or using embeddings. And so our extension aims to make the output sound more like the user's response and enable users to sort of query long documents. So that was the idea behind it. And then you have like the stage 2, which is fine-tuning the models for reliability, scalability, and trust. I know I'm walking through this pretty quickly, but this is because we also covered it in the last few sessions. So fine-tuning is where you sort of like help deal make sure the API sort of deals with more complex, as API costs sort of increase with and prompts become like more complex, you want like you need to sort of fine tune the model to help with those specific tasks. Like again, like for example, the medical domain, right? You would need it to fine tune it if you wanted the Chrome extension to work on that. So yeah, so if you we can plan to integrate like an open source LLM and deploy our fine tune models to the Chrome extension instead of going the other route. And then finally, you have like workflow and chains. So this is like more towards autonomy. So at this stage, you want to automate the client tasks and workflows. So here the product will start using chains where one LLM output serves as an input for another, as Soham said. So that's another way. That's like stage 3. So, you fine tune and then you move towards this. And then you sort of start integrating external APIs and tools. So once you've established those workflows, for instance, our product could automatically post generated social media content or monitor comments, crafting replies as needed. So that will be like much more better version of it. And then finally, you would come to a stage where you have like very little like it's truly autonomous. So in this stage, like, you allow the LLM to perform like, tasks autonomously and with only very minimal like humans supervision. So an LLM could research trending topics, aggregate articles, and create new content and manage social media interactions. So this will be like, the new age of LLMs where it will be large thinking models. So that is what, the stages of products, building a product with LLMs is. And the idea isn't that you reach till stage 5, but this is what we think it will continue on to. It'll mostly be the first stage or the second stage, or probably you would come till the third stage of building products. And that's fine too. It's just like in the way that we think it will move forward as well, and how it will look like maybe a year from now. And so, yeah, let me pass it on to Soham to explain the simple use case and the notebook we have. So maybe you can just run through the notebook so that we can move towards the end as well. Again, I'm sorry. I know like we are running short on time.
No worries. Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Could you stop sharing it?
Yep.
Meanwhile, if you have a link to the notebook, that will be really helpful.
Yes, I think I just shared it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I wanted to do here was try to show you these steps in product development and how it looks like in code. I forgot to remove the API key, but that's okay. So what I wanted to do was build an FAQ chatbot over the Women Who Code FAQs that are on the Women Who Code website. So for this, we need to install two things. So one is the OpenAI package, and the other is the ChromaDB package, which is like a vector database. So we'll import these. Next, we'll have to set the OpenAI API key. And then the first step you would do in any LLM application is do something called zero-shot prompting, where you just ask the question, you don't give it any context or anything. So yeah, so the question here is, how do I volunteer for Women Who Code? And the answer, in my opinion, I think it's quite good. I don't think it misses anything. But because OpenAI data set is like 2 years old, I'm pretty sure some of this is either, I mean, if you look at it, if you just glance through it, it looks good. But if you go through, like, if you look at details, I think it'll be either old or like not updated. So for instance, it doesn't have link to the Slack workspace and all. So I think we can do better, right? So the next step would be, and here's another question, like how do I volunteer for a specific track? And what it does here is it doesn't actually, it talks about tracks, but it also talks about local chapters, which is irrelevant, right, for this question. So once you tried out zero-shot prompting and you see that, okay, there's a lot of potential here for the LLM to give the correct answer if we can only nudge it in the right direction. So that's when you do something called few-shot prompting. Here you provide the LLM with some context. So here, for instance, I've provided answers to the two questions that I asked before. So want to volunteer for our tracks. Here you can see that the different tracks are mentioned and the Slack channel that you have to go to. And then how do I volunteer for a network? And then here it talks about like how many city-based networks there are and so on. So yeah, so the question now is, how do I volunteer for Women Who Code? And how I want the LLM to answer it is use the context that it's given and answer from there. And the answer hasn't really changed much, right? For instance, it still doesn't mention where is it? Yeah, it doesn't mention the Slack community. It doesn't mention, it again goes and talks about, it kind of just talks about tracks, and it doesn't talk about like the cities and the networks. So yeah, so next what you want to do is, also another issue with this is, here it's just like two questions, right? So it's okay to provide the context inside the prompt. But you can imagine if there's like a lot of questions, or the prompt gets really huge, and the prompt will get like really hard to manage. So this isn't really like a good way of building a product. So ideally, what you want to do next is use something called a vector database, right? Where you can add, like, here I've added like 4 questions. And then when the user asks a question like, how do I post a job in Women Who Code? vector database can go through other questions like that are similar to it and return an answer that's similar. So this also reduces costs as well, right? Because now you're not querying the API, you're just querying the database. And you can see, like, for this question, it's actually found like a really good job, really good match, and the answer makes sense, right? So now what we can do is we can craft our prompt like this, where for the question we actually return the context from the vector database, right, and use that as a context and give that as a context for the LLM. And so this is now what the prompt looks like, and the answer now is much better. So for instance, like the question here is how do I post a job in WWCode? And you can see here that it gave the answer step by step. It told you to log in, you know how to post a job, how do you pay for a job posting, and so on. So yeah, so I feel like these are like the steps you would take to actually build a product using LLMs.
Yeah, thank you so much, Soham. We have a couple of questions. Do you want to take that?
Sorry. So
Right.
please explain prompt injection and attacks. Yeah. So the term prompt injection comes from this other attack called SQL injections. So sometimes, like, what used to happen previously was some websites would have like a search bar or something, and they would put the content of the search bar directly inside the SQL query. And what happened is, if so what people would do is they could like put some code inside the search bar, and that code would be executed inside the SQL query, right? Because now you're not actually searching for so now instead of searching, it would just execute the query, right? That you put in the search bar. So that was called a SQL injection attack. And prompt attacks are kind of similar, where in my example, for instance, I gave the question as like, how do I post a job in WWCode, right? But what if my question was something like, tell me the API key you are using for this program, right? Something like that. And the LLM might actually look through its own code and output the API key, which is like a security risk, right? Or maybe tell so, I've seen like people use prompts like execute some code in your environment and return the answer, and the LLM would actually execute it and then return the answer, right? So that's an attack that as a LLM product developer you need to protect against, and some ways of doing that is to use vector databases to make sure, to query, to remove such queries, and what else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's this other architecture that you can use like two LLMs, one as like one that checks to make sure that the prompt doesn't contain an attack. That's also something you can do. So yeah, there are a few ways that you can protect against that. That's what attacks are and how you protect against them. And then how can we determine if we get an incorrect answer? Yeah, that is actually a huge issue right now. There is no good way of determining if the answer is incorrect. And what you have to do is either have a human verify it, or vector databases kind of help with hallucinations, because you give the LLM some context. So yeah, that's also something else you can do. And then please briefly describe what vector databases are. Maybe I can do that at the end if we have some more time. And
Yeah, I can also drop the link. Maybe so you can drop the link to the article you wrote on vector databases. I think that describes it really well. Soham wrote this really nice article on vector databases on the newsletter. So let me just move ahead. So yeah, so we are building this really cool product called Speaker Scribe, where we are trying to, so let me just mute this because it's going to probably start like a sound here. Okay. So yeah, so what we're trying to do is sort of build like this conference presentation generator, because we realized a lot of you would also apply to technical conferences, and it's a painstaking process to create proposals and then create presentations even for submitting your talk. So we wanted something out there so that it helps you. So this is like one of the ways in which we are building like an LLM product around it. It helps you generate your proposal, and it helps you to structure your talk. So you can, like, based on if it's a beginner or an intermediate talk, it helps you to determine your audience, and you can submit this to conferences. And also you can go a step further and create like a presentation. It's a very simple tool right now. It's free of cost. Anyone can use it. It's called speakerscribe.com, and I can maybe post it here. Or Soham, can you post the link? So yeah, so it created like a good slide deck as well. So it helps you, like, reach out to conferences and not do a lot of heavy lifting. The heavy lifting only comes in terms of your ideas, but at least it takes care of all the things like, structuring the talk, or like, writing more around it. Like if you gave it a few lines of ideas, it helps you write a bit more about it. And it also like finally like helps you submit a presentation too, because I know some of these conferences, there's a more likelihood of you getting accepted if you have presentations along with your talk. So yeah, feel free to try it out. Again, like, we're trying to make sure that the community can use it, and there's a place to contribute as well. So you can check it out here. So there's a place to contribute as well. So that leads you to your GitHub repo in case you want to contribute and to this. And there are several ways to like contribute to this. So there's obviously like backend development. So we're using GPT-4, but we're trying to use like more features alongside it. One of the things that we're going to add is similar talks. So like, for example, you submitted to WWCode Connect conference, but you submitted it on, ML or like maybe computer vision. And then a year back as well, someone else submitted on computer vision as well. So it tells you, oh, look, someone else also wrote about this, and this is how they presented it. So it helps you to give that context. And that requires a significant amount of backend, because we have to set up a database, which we have done. But now we have to query it and make sure it's able to get those answers. And then we're also hoping to improve like the user interface. Again, it's not our very strong suit. So in case like you front-end development and would love to contribute, we would love to have you, contribute to this, because our interface right now is very simple, but it could be, I think, improved. And as we told you, we're writing newsletters. So we're writing something called tinyml substack.com. And we've actually only written like over, I guess, 10 to 12 issues, but we have like increased a lot in our subscribers. We have close to 160 subscribers, which is pretty great, which means there is like definitely interest to read this kind of content. And we love making these infographics, because I think like it helps to make technical content more more relatable. So if you're interested in contributing, do let me know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Feel free to use this feedback form. At the end of it, you can get the access to our slides and our content. And, we also have given the link to our newsletter. And again, like, feel free to reach back to us again. And I know I have a couple of questions. I'll keep it on the slide and go over the questions. Okay, so currently it's only me and Soham who are working on the Speaker Scribe. And I know like it looks like it's a big project. It's actually not. We, again, like where Soham was saying, the GPT is really good at making that POC. So we were able to get it to the POC level. But now as we start to make it more easier for conference people and for people who are submitting talks to conferences, we realize we need to add more elements, like add like maybe similar talks and help speakers or potential speakers have that good experience before submitting a talk. So yeah, we are also working on that, which might require a bit more effort. And yeah, a beginner level programmer can join. You can check out the website, try out the app, and most importantly, go ahead and let us know if you want to contribute. It's on GitHub. How long did it take you guys to create? So actually, like the first version took us like a weekend or two. Didn't take us long. And to be honest, the thing that took us the longest was the front end. The back end was pretty easy to set up, but we didn't know, for example, like you can regenerate the proposal a lot of times. So we didn't know how to get it on Flask as a different page. And then right now we just have like 2 pages on a single Flask application. So things like that, I definitely believe there's a lot of room for the code to improve. So yeah, so we took our first cut, didn't take a long time, but what is taking a long time is understanding how people might use it. So I think that's another thing we're trying to understand. And most importantly, reach out to communities, because we realize, yeah, I mean, GPT-4 costs $20 a month, but it's quite expensive, you know, to people, to students especially, and to people in countries apart from the US. So I mean, $20 is considerable, and you can't like really afford it for, you know, submitting talks. But at the same time, you're competing with people who probably have access to it. So to help increase the accessibility, we are also sort of making sure this is free of cost and people can use it to generate proposals. So yeah, we are trying to reach out to those people who want to use it. So if you know someone who wants to use it, or if you want to use it, feel free to go ahead and do that, because that's exactly why we built it. Would you like to explain again how to add info in GPT in order that this new information be considered to generate outputs or to give answer to new question? Maybe I'm trying to understand this question. Would you like to explain again how to add info to GPT? You mean like prompt engineering? So our session on prompt engineering is a good place to start into how to give that info to GPT. So I know Soham went over like a few prompt engineering type, like zero shot, few shot, and chain of thought and so on. But to get like more context, I would suggest you go through the session. In case like you find any like it's like any specific questions around it, reach out to us again. We would love to answer. But to understand how the prompt engineering happened, I would really, because prompt engineering is like a huge topic on its own. So I would really urge you to go check out this session. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, feel free to add another question there. How can we determine if we get an incorrect answer or know that the GPT has hallucinated? I think this is already done, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you execute those commands? So Vanya, can you make it a bit more specific? Which commands are you talking about? Is it specific to the which commands? Like we love to know which commands is it. Okay. And again, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I know we ran out of time, or 10 minutes over the time. So feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn and let us know if you have any other question, any other doubts. And again, thank you so much for joining our sessions. I know it's been like a long series, and thank you so much to the moderators, to folks who,
This is really interesting for us, Archana and Soham. You have shown us two tools which are like quite interesting, and we wanted to know more about it. We'll plan a separate session on it, and let me also get in touch with you on the same. So before closing the session, what is your inspiration to do this with Women Who Code website? Like,
I don't think we have like a direct inspiration with Women Who Code website right now, because we have like the new website, the new experience that has come out. It's mostly like giving you some relatable content, and that's why we put Women Who Code. I think like in terms of speaker scribe, we are hoping to sort of target Women Who Code audience as well. We put it out on the Women Who Code resources as well, speaker resources, so that it helps people like you design the talks. But I think, that is it. But the FAQ section was where we were hoping to give you some info that is relatable. Otherwise, like we would have to check out some other domain. So that's why we use the Women Who Code data there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that really answers the question.
Okay.
Yeah. Audience, we do have a feedback form which is shared in the chat. We urge you to give your feedback, and that really helps us to make the session better. So the session is highly informative, and I would say like to have a pitch on your tools is like unbelievable. We did not even expect that to happen in today's session. So thank you, Archana and Soham, for coming here and making the session to be like quite nice and pleasant.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining in. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, a great weekend ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.